Welcome to the Therapist Hour. I'm so glad that all of you could join us. And we're here with Dr. Michael Alpert of New York City, who is not only an old colleague, but also old friend of mine. And I'm just so excited to have you all join us today as we learn about what he has learned in his past 50 years of psychotherapy as a therapist. Michael, thank you so much for coming to the Therapist Hour.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction and for inviting me. I love to talk about this. I'm asking that you interrupt me whenever you think I should explain something a little more or clarify what I'm talking about. Some of the things will be well known to you. Some things may be new. We'll try to strike a balance so that people can, kind of get their questions answered and at the same time move along. Now, I'm going to talk without many notes. I have reminders here, and I guess the thing that, and I'll have to put glasses on for this part since this is, I'm going to cover these points quickly. I think there are two really important things that I've learned during this time. And the first one is to teach therapists and patients, or if you don't like patients, we'll call them clients, how to be aware of themselves in a sensory sense. Be aware of their sensory makeup, because these body sensations are what really emotions are, feelings are. And becoming aware of this helps you tremendously to care for your patients and to care for yourself. So the next thing, so this first thing is sensory self-awareness and self-care. And then the second thing is how to use your senses to enhance your ability to observe yourself and observe others. And it may sound redundant, but it's slightly different. And what I think helps doing this is to be very transparent, let people know what's going on with you, how you're reacting, get them to be transparent that way. Modeling it helps a lot. Having it be a one-way street is a problem because it leaves too much to the imagination of your client, patient, clients. I think, anecdotes, little stories from your experiences in life. I think role-playing examples. I think sensation-enhancing techniques all help demonstrate these concepts, and we're going to use them today. Lastly, you want to have a good time with whatever you're doing. I love doing psychotherapy. I feel like it is the best possible thing anyone could do. You get to know people, be close to them, help them, and they want to help you, and they do. It's a two-way street. So it is a joy, and I hope that will come through as we talk more. Now, is there anything at this point that I've said that you want to ask me about, or it's not clear, or that raises some concern? Okay. If not, we'll have another chance. Now, feel free to, if this is lunchtime, to eat lunch. If you need to take a bathroom break, get a coffee, do whatever you need to do, it's fine. Um, the next thing that I want to comment on is I think the reason I have learned to do this is because I find that when I explain what's going on with me, people trust me more, but they also feel that I kind of am with them rather than somewhere out there, some unknown source. I'm not as much a parent figure. I become more me. There's always a tremendous amount of transference that occurs, but it doesn't get in the way so much. And that I learn about them by their reactions. Some people are terrified by it. Some people want to know very little, and I cut it down then. I try to adapt to what works for them. So I begin therapy like most people do. I ask why you come, what your problems are, what your symptoms are. And I said, I learn, well, are they bringing symptoms that have to do with their core feelings, their basic feelings, their comfort or discomfort with themselves? Or are they bringing things that have to do with the difficulty they have in dealing with other people or people who they fear or hate or traumas they've experienced? And so I then will work in whatever area seems most appropriate at the time. It's, for instance, if they're telling me they're in this, if you come out of an ISTDP background, you might do it differently, because if they're telling you about their anger, you're going to want to explore that. And I'm usually interested in what they're avoiding with their anger, because anger is a later defense, one that comes after you have felt something else. For instance, people get angry when they feel threatened, when they feel vulnerable, when they feel weak, when they're losing something. They often get angry. And so is their anger due to that? If so, it's not anger I'm after, it's what's underneath. The anger is just in the way. That's how they're trying to guard against it. Because you feel angry, you feel, oh, yes, I'm angry, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I'm going to get rid of them, or do this. But then after your anger, there's still the problem. You still, if you suffered a loss, you still have that loss there. You could curse them out, but underneath, you're still going to hurt. So, so if the underlying issue is that they're trying to get away from, that I'm usually interested in. Now, if you, on the other hand, if they come in and they're obsessing and they're frantic and they're nervous, I view that as a coping mechanism like the anger, but it's a coping mechanism that actually has gone awry. In other words, instead of it being a warning and saying, hey, there's something I got to look out for here and do something, they get stuck obsessively in the loop of their frantic, worried behavior or their panic. And you have to do something about that and get them to not feel so dangerous, so frantic and scared. And there are a lot of things that one can do to calm people down when they're that way, and psychologically or with medication, but you want to dampen that down because it's keeping them away from solving their problem. Their problem has become their anxiety, and anxiety is not meant to be a problem, it's meant to be a warning sign. So if you look at things, most people come in with anxiety disorders, relationship disorders, or depression. And so that leaves depression and relationship problems. So depression can look, like, they want medicine, they can't stand the depression, but the important thing to do is to look for trauma when you see depression, or you look for something that's really overwhelming them. And a good example of, we all know about traumas where people have been abused or in one way or another. And they have often don't know how to handle that. If it's been parental abuse, they've often solve it by identifying with the parent. They feel they deserve the abuse because that way they can hang on to the parent. And they don't think of it consciously, but you hang on by repeating the interaction. They may find people like the parent to get involved with, to try to save that relationship and thereby hang on to their parent. And so there's a lot of repetition that occurs. Now, before I go on to the next piece, any comments or questions? Because without feedback, I could go down the wrong hole.
Well, one thing that I'm noticing, Michael, is that you're really asking us to, pay attention to the presenting problem, but to mostly pay attention to what's underneath the surface, like what anxieties are there and what's behind the presenting problem. And then I'm hearing you say, like, definitely look at past traumas and how they could be reenacted today in current relationships. Is
Correct.
that
Sure,
okay?
sure.
All right. All right.
That's
I gotta finish your question.
Pardon?
Yep.
I have
go
a
ahead.
question.
Shoot.
I've, of course, followed your career since we met in the early 90s when you were hosting conferences in New York City. And I've listened to you talk about anger. And I've been back and forth my whole career about anger, starting with ISTDP and everybody should slaughter their parents on the railroad tracks, to anger is secondary and let's get to what's beneath it. For some patients, I still find it's really healthy and curative for them to experience an anger. It might be in a fantasy a la Davalou. It might just be a verbal fantasy like Les Greenberg's Empty Chair. And when they do it, they can sit back and say, oh, I just got intensely angry. Nobody got hurt. Nobody judged me for it. Nobody shamed me for it. And it's really very healing. Do you ever approach anger that way in your current approach?
Yes. I sometimes approach it that way. It's not my first approach usually. If it doesn't seem to what I'm doing isn't dealing with the anger, they don't move beneath it very quickly, I'll go back and try something like that.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Okay, so you've already, with the help of Kristin and Steve, see that there's a lot of flexibility in this model, and that the things that I'm going to be going into in detail are coming now. So I'm going to move to that in just a second. But the piece that Kristin already just introduced was the relationships and that where things get repeated. And so I in this initial period, I also want to find out when they bring things up, if they've felt this before at some time. There's some echo of this in the past, because often It's the past where the problem is. Now, the thing I like to do, and there's a lot of bouncing between these two things, is to try to get people, try to measure, first of all, what it's like for them to see themselves on the screen. As a 4.5-year-old that I know said to her mother, Mom, why are you so sad? And Mom said, I'm not sad. And she said, but you look sad. And the mother said, but I'm not sad. I don't think I am sad. And she said, but I can see your face and I see sadness. You can't see your face. You're not looking at your face. And her mother said, you're right, I'm not looking. And she went and looked. And she said, my God, I do look sad. So people don't know how they look. We're all looking out. We look through our eyes at others. And the lesson here is look at yourself. Therapists need to read themselves on the screen first. Second, keep alternating between you and who you're treating.
So, Michael, I just want to interrupt because there's some people who don't know that when you are working, you have a video camera on your patient as well as yourself. And in your office, there's a screen that shows their image and a screen that shows your own image.
That's true. And actually, it's a little different right now because my offices are closed.
Right.
I haven't reopened. So it's all virtual. And so we are on the screen all the time.
Right.
All you have to do, you just move your eyes a tiny bit. The trick is to have the camera set in the way so you look like you're looking straight ahead.
Right. But I think also, for people who are unfamiliar with your work, I mean, you have a lot of emphasis on having the patient pay attention to their own face, having the therapist pay attention to their own face, and then also using the images so that the patient can look at the therapist's face. And so there's a lot of just drawing people's attention, their awareness to how they look and how the therapist looks too.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. So this is what I'm hoping for, that you'll keep reframing things and saying them in a more intelligible way. Thank you. I'm
just filling in the gaps. That's all.
Yeah, I know. That's what's important. That's what's important. So the seeing yourself brings in all of the feelings on your face that you need to see. So I'll give you a graphic example, something some of you know about, where when I started first to recognize how important this was, when I was talking to someone who was getting nowhere in a hurry. And I was pushing and pushing and pushing. And the more I pushed, the less I was getting back. And I finally looked at myself and I looked like this. And I said, oh my God, that poor old guy, he looks so tired. And hearing those words of compassion for him made me smile. Now, it doesn't always work that way, but it worked that way for me.
Right.
And I realized that I felt much better. And I turned back to the person I'd been working with. And I looked at the person and he became much more malleable. Suddenly it was easy. So I had had become a countertransference problem. I was in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So if you watch yourself, you can fix that. But more importantly, I had compassion for myself. And that's when I began to realize how important that was.
Mm.
Just how important it was to have compassion for yourself. And the more I worked with that, the more I realized that that's what was lacking in so many of the people I was working with. That they didn't have self-compassion. They didn't know how to connect with themselves. So I started working on how to connect them with themselves.
Well, and also, Michael, like you noticed how therapists struggled with self-compassion in their work too, and how important it is for a therapist to be self-compassionate when working and outside of work too. But
I think the more you can do it, the better. I think that you share it. I mean, I've been seeing people all morning today. I started at 8 and I went every hour until now. And I had a great time with each one. And some of them did miraculous things. I had some of them just moved through things wonderfully. Some were still struggling, but it made some significant gains. But the more I do this, the more I get people in touch with self-compassion and with their body sensations, the faster they move. And I'm not blowing smoke. I actually, one of the nice things about virtual is I now make them co-host and they get to record to their machine so they can watch over and over. And I also don't have to have all these records piled up that I then have to make sure are secure. I just make sure that they know that after they've finished watching them enough times, they erase them.
Lovely.
Any other comments at this point? Questions? Strange things that don't make sense that you want me to clarify or Kristin to clarify?
Just call me the clarifier.
Okay. Anyone want to vomit?
Stop.
Well, you never. No, people have sometimes. Look, you forget that if you put something that had a strong emotion on a screen,
Yeah.
it can be very difficult. Do you remember being in Washington, D.C. when I was interviewing that boy?
Yeah.
Young man?
Yeah.
And we were blown up with theater-size images, and this woman in the third row said, "Get that out of my face. I can't stand it."
Right.
Okay, so I ask because I want to find out whether I'm creating a problem.
Does anyone want to vomit?
So I think we have the answer, right? Nobody's volunteered that.
I mean, it is a good reminder that for people to pay attention to how they're feeling as they listen.
So what I'd like to demonstrate is one thing you can do to help people get in touch with what's going on with them. And it involves a very simple exercise that we can all do right now. It's a sensory exercise. There's nothing particular about it. It may remind you of hypnotic inductions, but it's not a hypnotic induction. It may remind you of some meditative thing. It's maybe like that, but I'll explain it as we go along. So you take your hands and you can have them kind of pointed at each other. You don't have to have them up here. You can rest them on your lap, whatever's comfortable, but just so they're apart a little bit and your consciousness is on your hands. And close your eyes and just pay attention to the sensations in your fingers and hands. And everyone's hands has tons of nerve endings. So there's temperature, there's touch, there's all kinds of positional things. There are very small fibers, C tactile afferent fibers. They're just fibers are discovering all the time. And if you just pay attention, you'll become aware of things like tingling, throbbing, swelling, twitches, little pings, little almost like sparks. Just keep doing that. And whatever there is, just watch them. Continue to watch. We're going to take a couple minutes. Just let everybody just feel their hands. And then I'll ask if anybody wants to say a few things about what they felt in their hands. And then we'll take it the next step. So I'm going to stop and just feel. Okay. Believe it or not, that's a minute. May seem like the longest minute you've had in a long time. Anybody want to comment on what they experienced in their hands?
I mean, Michael, I actually did experience some compassion for myself through this exercise.
Well,
I could even hear Lee, like, encouraging me to experience compassion. So
fantastic.
it was nice.
So this is a speedy shortcut.
All right.
Wonderful feelings.
Yeah.
Anyone else experience anything in their hands or anything like what Kristin experienced? Or anything they want to ask about it?
Hi, this is Linda. I noticed that my hands were tense,
Mm-hmm.
and then I thought, well, I'm trying too hard.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well,
Attention is something that you feel. What I was feeling were tingling and then throbbing, and then my fingers felt more and more tense, almost like swollen, and even bigger. And that's one of the things you feel. Some people it extends up their arms. Some people it extends to other parts of their body. So it's not, the sense of rigidity is not that you're trying too hard. It's just the sensation you have.
okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Any other concerns?
Hi, I'm Patricia.
Yes.
I just felt like moving my fingers rapidly, but I could not. I was thinking, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel. I'm not noticing much. And then I felt really sleepy. I really felt like just falling asleep. I mean, it's the morning here. I'm on the West Coast.
Yes.
But that was it.
Well, I think that's an interesting pathway, and that's, I think, worth exploring, because I would say someone told me that's what's happening, and I would say to them simply, that's, as you just pay attention to what it's like to wiggle your fingers then. And that sleepy feeling, where do you feel that sleepy feeling? Is that in your head or someplace else? Just describe it and feel that. Because as you said it, I started wiggling my fingers to see what that was like. And I noticed a number of different things. So that's fine. Just continue to pursue it, just like that. Just what the sleepiness is like, what this movement is like. What do you feel in your fingers as you move them? Just, and you can see I'm kind of wiggling my fingers right now. I think actually it's a little easier for me if I hold them still, because the wiggling by the muscle movements creates other things. So it brings my attention more to the movement and less to the sensation. So I probably don't do that much, but all these things are reasonable.
Well, one thing I'm noticing is how you're letting go of judgment or thoughts about what is this that I'm experiencing. It's more just about experiencing the sensation and being aware without labeling it.
Good. Now, I'm trying to be mindful of the time, so I'm going to take this to the next step. And that is that if you let yourself feel these things, what happens is you find that things happen in other parts of your body. So you may feel things on your scalp, you may feel things on your back, you may feel things in your chest, you may feel things in your belly. Now, you may feel things in your eyes. Sometimes people feel their eyes begin to water. You may feel things in your forehead. They're all important. And as you begin to feel these things, more and more things happen. So as people often get frightened by them, they think, oh, I shouldn't feel this. This must mean something's wrong. There's really nothing that's going to be wrong in doing this. In fact, it's all grist for the mill, most of it very valuable. I haven't heard anybody say anything that's not highly valuable so far. So you may itch, you may want to scratch something. Itching is a common thing. As you pay attention to your skin, you're more aware of all these little things. Itch receptors are randomly firing, so you itch more because you're more aware of them. You know, it's until you focus on an area of your body a little bit, you're not aware of what's happening in it. And things are happening all over. We just can't pay attention to all of it at once. And we tend to get locked in our heads and forget about this part of us. But since we're therapists, we need to pay attention to this part. And I motioned to my chest when I said that because the oldest part of this apparatus is in the chest. In the mediastinum, that's the area beneath the breastbone or the sternum, there are major structures. Your esophagus goes through there, part of your bronchial tree, part of your heart is there. So, and giant autonomic ganglia are there. It's the home of the vagus nerve. And this is the oldest nerve in our bodies in an evolutionary sense. This was there long before we were mammals. This is there through basically since the first cylinderates, which are these tube-shaped animals that covered the seafloor with fossils. They're microscopic. In the Precambrian era, 600 million to a billion years ago, and with electron microscopy, we're beginning to see that actually they go back even farther. And I think the latest estimate may be 2.5 billion years. At first, they were 1 cell thick. It was a tube that was 1 cell thick, and it was microscopic in size. And gradually, and there was water that would pass through the lumen of the tube. And then soon, hundreds of million years went by, and then you had 2 layers. The inner layer, which was the lining of the tube, and the outer layer, which was the skin. And then a couple 100 million years more, and then you suddenly had a 3rd layer in the middle, the mesoderm, and that were muscle cells and nerve cells. And those nerve cells were the cells of the beginning of the autonomic nervous system. And what they did was what they do today. That nerve is the longest nerve in the body. It follows the route of all the organs in the body, and the longest organ of all in the body is the digestive tract. They run along the digestive tract. So what in this tube, going back to it, what happened is these nerve cells monitored the comfort or discomfort of the lining cells of the tube. And when there was not enough food or too much waste in that water in the tube, the nerve cells read the discomfort in the lining cells and fired the muscle cells to squish. And out would come all the water, and then they would relax, and in would come fresh water. And this was a big advance. And these things just were, this is all you see in this for feet, for a great depth of seafloor, is these early organisms. And they could now regulate it somewhat. And this squishing out and opening up and taking in new is, as you can see, there's a relationship to what we do. We're in a sense tubes with a lot of fancy stuff. Our one tube is here. And when these organisms would squish, they'd squish it out both ends. We tend to squish it down, but sometimes we squish both ways. Now, the issue here is that people have all kinds of peristaltic squishing motions when they eat, when they have discomfort, when they have irritable bowel, on and on. These are all related to that. But this system is the preliminary comfort-discomfort system. And this system is very simple, using very simple neurotransmitters, cheap to make. The body always makes cheap neurotransmitters first, and the expensive ones they use rarely because it's just not economical. And so basically, either it's comfortable or just uncomfortable. It squishes, basically, and discomfort, and then relaxes. That's it. Doesn't do anything if you're comfortable. Now, so here we are, and we have terms like heartbroken, or having your heart's strings pulled, or we have our broken heart at the loss of something. So what do they feel like if you explore them? They feel painful, empty, aching, pressure, expansion, heat. Sometimes, like if you see a bunch of, pardon me if this is offensive in any way, older Jewish women, grandmothers sitting around talking about their grandchildren, they go, I'm kvelling, it's so wonderful. They feel wonderful talking about their grandchildren and showing the pictures. And they love their grandchildren. They love holding them. You can't do enough for them. And as parents, you can't do enough for your kids. You have to keep from spoiling them. But if you could, if you could, you just give them everything and not make them grow and try things. But some of you may have had the experience of bonding with your child when they were tiny. When suddenly you felt this connection, it may have been in utero, it may have been post-utero, that you suddenly felt you would do anything. You would throw yourself in harm's way to save this child. And you may have even seen people running and lifting a car off a child. So how did they do that? They're going to have a break their back, but they are throwing themselves in the way of something that's going to be very, very destructive to them to save their child. So these are hardwired in mammals, particularly humans, and this is what makes us who we are. So we have this bond, and when the bond forms, it may be very painful because we don't know what it is. I know when it happened to me with my first child, I had no idea what, I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't know what it was. And the next night I had a dream. And I dreamed that I was pushing my child, who was 2 months old, in a stroller. And then I stopped to talk to some friends, and the stroller was about a yard or two away. And all of a sudden I heard a dump truck bearing down. I looked up and I was going to hit that stroller. I ran and dived and pushed the stroller aside, committing suicide. What a dream. And then I realized a couple of weeks later that this had to do with that punch in the chest. Now, it also hurts like hell when you lose someone you love. When a dear person dies or leaves you. So there are lots, you can feel the same sensation, but the situation determines whether you love having it, love being in love and love this child, or when you just can't bear it as a loss. So working in this area when you get the chance and sensitizing people to these things, sensations and feelings helps them to make sense of their life and to appreciate what's happening. Now, life is full of ups and downs, health and happiness, illness and sadness. As Dickens said in A Tale of Two Cities, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. You need to be able to make use of both. It's the combination of both which makes life. Another way of putting it is that life is a bowl of cherries. Some of them are sweet and some of them are sour. Love the sweet ones. We don't love the sour ones, but when they're mixed together, they make a very tart confection that makes life great. So, questions, comments before we go further?
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
I guess I'd be interested in, like, how do I use, like, what you just shared with us in session with someone that I'm working with?
Well, you tell them these things.
Mm-hmm.
You give examples from your own life or from literature or from disguised patients. You know, you flip, you know, when I talk about a man or a woman, it's invariably who knows what it is or how old or young or anything. So you make sure they're cleanse it a little bit, but you give examples. You tell how people struggle, how you've struggled. You talk about appreciating things as they happen. I had a guy today who I saw, and he's a very nice man. And he knows I have trouble with keeping time. He always sends me a confirmation post saying, are we going to meet at this time tomorrow? And if I haven't sent the link yet, 2 minutes before the session, I always get another post. Am I going to get a link? I said to him, you know, it's very, very sweet of you to do that because I appreciate the reminders. And he smiles and I say, you're really a very thoughtful person. And he said, I bet you do this with a lot of people. He says, I do. He said, but nobody says anything. I said, well, I think it's wonderful. And he smiled and he cried a little bit. And he let my appreciation come in. He believed me. He's not prone to believe. He's tired for him. And we talked about his wife. He worries a lot. We talked about ways of helping her with her worry that would be gentle. Slight variations on what he does, but he tends to be cognitive, doesn't think in those terms.
Well, it sounds like you're very loving, and, you know, a part of being loving is also being honest, and asking someone to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Look, I find the more honest I am,
Mm-hmm.
the more I accept what people tell me as a kind and caring, the better it is for both of us.
Mm.
And the more it's,
So like perceiving people as kind and caring, perceiving them as loving is really
acknowledging it's there. If they're frowning at me, I want to know why they're frowning. If they smile, comment on their smile. I want them to see the smile and the frown, just like I want to see mine. Where the action is.
So, I mean, it is like you're mirroring back to them what you're seeing, and then also communicating honestly with them about what you're seeing. And then it sounds like waiting to see how they respond, if they do.
Sure.
Well, I wonder if I can talk about something that troubles me. Is that sometimes I find that at certain moments of a session, I feel extremely sleepy. And I know it doesn't have to do with how tired I am. It's nothing of the sort. I checked it very carefully. And I found that the way I deal with it with some people, I say, I don't know what's going on with you. Are you aware that you're holding back something that you're not talking about, but maybe you're not totally conscious? Can you take a moment and check if that resonates with you? And when the person says, yes, I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid to talk about this, whatever it is. And as soon as they say it, my sleepiness disappears.
Yeah, so that works well. You can approach it from that side too. There's something going wrong. You're sleepy. You don't know what's going on with them, and you ask them. That's a great thing to do. You can also look at yourself and say, gee, how do I feel about this sleepy person? He's so sleepy now. And then it may wake you up, and you may do exactly what you said you would have done anyway. Or maybe you'll do something different. Maybe you'll say, I'd have to put myself in that situation. But it's another way of approaching the interaction between you and the person you're working with, which is what you want to keep going, exploring these interactions.
But I don't say to them or him that I'm sleepy. I say, I wonder what's going on with you, because I think for many people to say the therapist is sleepy is very insulting, that they think, oh, I'm boring you.
I think you're right. I think the issue is you looking at either asking them what's going on with them or asking yourself, gee, how do I feel about this person who's feeling so sleepy? How do I feel? That may be enough to diminish the sleepiness, because you're aware of it, you're sleepy, but you kind of don't know what to do. And you're saying, so I'm going to say what's going on with you. But you want to see, okay. You're sleepy because the person's withholding, is what you're saying. So when you think, gee.
I usually self-attack. I say, oh, I have to be better. What can I do to get out of this? How much can I reveal?
Rather than self-attacking, all you have to do is say, gee, I'm sleepy because I'm trying here and I'm not getting a response. I'm waiting for this response, I'm not getting it. And wow, maybe we should talk about what's going on. Gee, you're very quiet. What's going on? I'm finding this to be very slow right now. I'm concerned. Okay.
I'd like to ask,
What's that, Stephen?
I cut Michael off, sorry.
No,
when a session slows down, I've got long ago, I got in the habit of just saying to the patient, how do you feel about the session? 9 times out of 10, they know, and they'll say, it feels kind of slow. And I'll say, well, I wonder why. I feel kind of shut down. And then I say, well, let's talk about shutting down. I don't have to say I'm sleepy or I'm bored to tears or whatever.
Sure.
If I just ask, often the patient knows.
Sure. The important thing is to be aware of what you're feeling and then to use it in some way, whether you use it as Steve would, or the way Nicole would, or the way I do, is that you bring it into the session.
So I'm wondering, like, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us? Like any more tidbits?
Well, there's lots of ways of working with this. We're talking about being transparent. We're talking about ourselves more, being active more. We're talking about what to do when things don't seem to be working good. We're talking about how to facilitate making therapy work better. So the keys that I want to drive home are increasing self-awareness, patient for patient, healer for healer, and for each other, and to keep trying to increase that awareness and doing exercises that make you as a therapist and make the person you're working with more aware of what's going on. And if you open those doors, that things just get better and better, and sometimes at alarming rates we're not prepared for. As people's sensations in their hands move to other hard parts of their body, they begin to find there's a lot going on they weren't aware of. And things start tumbling out that they hadn't even thought of bringing in. And their feelings in their chest, just as they are allowed to feel these things, become important. Because if you're really attuned to what's going on inside of you, you're aware of your chest all the time. And you have this comfort, discomfort meter right in the middle of your chest that you can just keep watching. And I'm talking to you as a group, and I'm feeling this pressure in my chest. And I know that this pressure is there because I feel like we are making contact. I feel like there's concern, there's caring. I look around faces, feel more connected. Don't seem like strangers. I don't know all of you very well. I know some of you quite well. And it feels good to be connected to. And it makes the feeling even greater. Now, if, on the other hand, everyone was walking out the door, I'd feel sad. I'd feel like I'd lost something. I might think, gee, what did you do wrong? I might feel, well, no, did I do something wrong? Or what can I learn from this? So it shifts around, but I'd be using this to make me make use of the interaction and also to feel even better and better. And then I would leave and go to the next interaction with whether patient or with family member or a friend. And in many ways, be watching this same area, because this kind of keeps me from going down the wrong wormhole. It increases my wish to connect and be close.
So Michael, just one more question before we wrap up. And it's like, what do you do if you're working with someone who's triggered or kind of, out of the zone of tolerance? Do you invite them to notice their body?
Well, I'll give you an example. I had a woman who was very distraught and who had been abused. And she had an abusive relative that would beat her and punch her. And she was talking about it, and all of a sudden she said, began to punch herself in the head. And I did not ask her questions. I said, you have to stop punching yourself in the head. I can't work with you if you're punching yourself in the head. It is too awful and too painful to see you hurt yourself this way. I don't want you hurting this way. I don't want you punched in the head. Let's talk about what's driving this. So I will do something to stop destructive acts. Similarly, if someone wants to do something that really is inappropriate to therapy, I'll tell them stop it. If someone says, this doesn't happen anymore. But when I was younger, sometimes I'd have a patient who said, I think the only thing that I really need from you right now is I need you to kiss me. And I'd say, I'm not sure why that is, but I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should explore what that's about and why that comes up now in the setting, because I don't think you came here for that. So let's find out what's going on right now. But that
That's
can't
great.
happen.
That's great. Thank you so much. I mean, just, giving us all permission to slow things down and to just say, let's pause and check in. So I just want to thank you. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our therapist hour, and we could, as usual, continue talking. And it's just been wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for
Joining
having me.
us.
This has been a lot of fun for me.
Yeah.
And I hope we'll talk again.
Okay. All right. Take
Okay.
care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.